What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 100 and... Not 100. Gosh, it's 98.
We're really close to 100.
We're really close to 100. That's what it is. But the 100 mark is usually the mark where, I've stopped some shows. So hopefully that doesn't happen here. But we'll have to do something special in a couple episodes. But I'm ChanManV, of course. FishStix joining me, as always. What's up, buddy?
Hello. Big day for Overwatch news and gameplay. I'm actually really excited for today. It's going to be a phenomenal day of esports action.
Absolutely, and a phenomenal day to discuss esports, too. And, of course, if we're going to be discussing esports, and particularly Overwatch League, we've got to have Jacob Wolf, ESPN Insider, on with us. What's up, Jacob?
How's it going?
Good. Busy week?
Needless to say, my messy house behind me, it's a little ashamed, but I, haven't really left the house. I've been out of the house maybe once this entire week, aside from taking the dog out. So it's I've been kind of a hermit. I ordered in groceries this morning, and it's just that's my life.
When duty calls, man, that's what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
So definitely plenty to talk about. Innerflame Joe Elouassi also will be joining us a little bit later. So he's going to be, obviously talking a lot about the Mayhem stuff that's been going on, or just generally in Season 1. We'll get a recap of everything in Season 1 with the Mayhem. But today we've got lots of Overwatch League news with expansions and player moves. We haven't done the show in a few weeks, so there's a bunch of player moves that we're going to want to be talking about. And then we've got Overwatch World Cup, Contenders. So, and I think that's it, right? I don't think we have any actual game talk today. So that's mostly going to be news, but there's a ton of it to talk about. So why don't we get started?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah, so let's talk expansions, given that we've got Jacob here, and Jacob obviously has been on top of reporting obviously teams, maybe two teams at a time, as they were basically getting confirmed from sources. But today, Blizzard officially announced the 8 teams that are going to be added to Overwatch League. But Jake, I'm just going to hand it to you. Why don't you kind of take us through this segment a bit?
Yeah, so the new cities so I guess I'll break down city and then break down owner.
Sure.
So it's in North America, it's Vancouver, which is owned by the Accolades Group, which is the ownership of the Vancouver Canucks and the Rogers Arena hockey team in the corresponding arena in Vancouver. In Toronto, it is Splice and Overactive Media, as well as backing from the Kimmel family, which are a wealthy Canadian family in Canada. They own a bunch of different companies across hospitality. Chase Hospitality Group is one that Michael Kimmel owns. His brother owns a company called Harlow Capital, who are involved. There's another company that his uncle owns called Westdale Properties, and his parents are very large Canadian wealthy philanthropists. So they are backing Splice and Overactive in this purchase, which is a $35 million slot purchase. In Washington, D.C., there's a bunch of there's 4 really different parties involved. So Mark Ein, who is the owner of the Washington Castles, which are a team tennis team in Washington, D.C., and he also runs a company called Capital Investment Corp 4, which are based in New York and Washington, D.C., and they are involved. The guy that runs that for him, Dyson Dryden, is also an investor, and then also there's another company called Artist Capital Management, which are based in New York and have some ties to some of the big sports owners in D.C. They're affiliated and friends. So that is the DC team. And then in Atlanta, which is confirmed about a month ago, is Atlanta Esports Ventures, which is a company backed by Cox Enterprises, the giant media conglomerate, Cox Cable, Cox Internet in the Southeast. And then they are run by a company called Province Inc., who are a consulting firm based out of Las Vegas. So that's our North American team.
Yeah, that's North America. So moving over to Europe.
Right. So Europe, there's only one team.
Yep.
It is Paris, and from my understanding of reading the interviews today, it is basically all of France as part of that region, which is how it works. The Mayhem own almost all of Florida, the Spitfire own almost all of England. You usually own your state and maybe even surrounding states if you buy a smaller area. So that's... In Paris, it's owned by a company called DM Esports, which is a new entity. I think a lot of people were confused because the communication was pretty bad around what this is. DM Esports is the esports company owned by the McCourt family, specifically Frank McCourt, who is the former owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he's the current owner of the Los Angeles Marathon and Olympique de Marseille, the soccer team in France. That's the connection to France. His son, Drew McCourt, which is what DM stands for, is the one that is leading it. And Drew is also very involved in McCourt Global, which oversees all their real estate holdings. A little bit of background on them. Frank is originally from Boston and made a lot of his come up as a financer by buying parking lots across multiple sports arenas. And parking lots are actually a pretty big money-making business. So he owns parking lots all across like Boston and Los Angeles and other things as well. He still owns a portion of the parking lot outside the Dodger Stadium, even though he doesn't own the Dodgers anymore. And so he used to own the Dodgers. He bankrupted the Dodgers while they were the highest selling team in all of traditional baseball. They were selling more tickets than everyone else. They were incredibly popular, and he bankrupted them by, from my understanding, and I was not a sports reporter at the time, leaning other loans with the Dodgers as collateral, which the MLB had to bail him out. The Dodgers are now owned. The Dodgers are now owned by a group like Peter Guber, Magic Johnson, and Guggenheim Baseball. So yeah, that's DM Esports. And then in Asia, there are 3 new Chinese teams. There is Chengdu, which is owned by Huya, which is a multi-billion-dollar streaming platform. It's a Twitch competitor in China, since Twitch is not necessarily in China at this point, at least on that level. So Huya and Douyu are the 2 biggest streaming sites in esports there in China. Huya received $461 million of investment from Tencent in March. And they are also a public company on the New York Stock Exchange. I believe they're worth about $3.52 billion. Pretty big deal. That's the Chengdu owner. In Hangzhou, there's another streaming and media company called Bilibili. Bilibili is essentially, I would compare it for Western viewers to like Crunchyroll or Funimation. They're an anime and recently got into esports a couple months ago, anime and esports media content website that does streaming and VODs and things like that. They're the Chinese equivalent to those 2 companies. And then lastly is the Ninking Group, who own Guangzhou. The Ninking Group is probably I would say the least wealthy of all of the Chinese ownership here. I think Bilibili is worth around $2 million. The owner of the Ninking Group is worth about $1 billion last I looked, and his net worth. And I mean, that's still a lot of money, but when you think about how much you're paying for these franchise fees, that's almost like a 20th of his wealth, which is a lot of money when you sponsor an Overwatch League team. So, I mean, comparatively, this is a big investment for them. They are the owners of the Guangzhou Long Lions, which is the Chinese Basketball Association team there. And that is your 8 owners in the Overwatch League.
There you go. There's a very nerdy breakdown of not just the teams, but the ownership groups behind them. You know, as folks that are part of the esports industry, it's really fascinating to see over the last couple of years all of the mainstream sports owners that are coming into the space, and now obviously we've got multiple U.S. stock exchange traded Chinese companies coming in. So it's fascinating to see where this money is coming from and exactly who is investing in this Overwatch League. And again, Jacob, I think it was you that originally reported that the buy-in fee is now something like 35 to 60 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Toronto was sold for 35 for sure, and I think it scales up from there. So I think the American teams were a little bit more than that. I think the Chinese teams were probably the most expensive of all of them, because there was a little bit of contention there. There were other Chinese buyers that wanted in. You know, if they would have sold 4 or 5 Chinese teams, I think they probably could have if they really wanted to. What's really interesting to me about this round versus last one, I think last year changed a lot of things in esports because the North American LCS and the Overwatch League were franchising and recruiting these buyers. Last year, we saw a lot of big buyers who kind of their money all came from the same pit. So like you had people like the Kraft family and the Kroenke family and Comcast Spectacor and these like very big companies that bought in last year, but they're all like wealthy, right? So like the Kroenkes who own the Gladiators, their money comes from Stan Kroenke, the husband being an incredibly wealthy real estate manager. and his wife is the heir to the Walmart fortune. His wife, who is of the Walton family that founded Walmart. The Kraft family, also very similar story of like very successful in real estate and manufacturing, owned the New England Patriots and have for many years, New England Revolution. It's all the same type of money. It all comes from the same spot. And then like Comcast Spectacor is the owner of tons of venues around the U.S. They also own the Philadelphia Flyers, and now they own the Philly Fusion. So it's all from the same spot. That's not the case this year. This year, I think, and it's part of that is because of the price, and the price being so much higher than last year. It's almost double and at the lowest end, and almost triple at the highest end. And because the price is so high, I think that a lot of people got very creative. We saw a lot of creative solutions. So Splice is the only endemic who has an ownership stake in one of these teams at this point. And that is, but they only own 10% of that team. And that's because they have to be creative. You have to have people like the Kimmel family who have billions of dollars to invest in this for you because it's so expensive. You have to look at relative worth, right? So like if you're Zhongnai Zhang, who owns the Guangzhou team, and you're worth $1 billion and you're spending $50 million, $60 million on Overwatch, that's a 20th of your wealth. That's a lot of money. Like it's asking for a 20th of what you have in your bank account. And for any of us, I think that's a lot of money. And so I think it's really important to look at it that way. And all of these are creative. The only one that's not incredible, the only like few that are not incredibly creative are Paris, Vancouver, and I guess even Hui is a little creative because of the Tensa thing, but like probably Paris, Vancouver, and I would say Hangzhou are the only ones that are not like incredibly creative on their financial structure. All the others are. And
when you say creative, you basically mean there's a lot of collaboration between different parties. Some are taking on different responsibilities and investment coming from multiple angles, right?
Correct. Yeah. So like it's not all one person, all one type of money, all from the same source. It is a bunch of people throwing in different amounts of money, structuring different things. And it's I don't want to say it's like a negative because it certainly has provided some very interesting opportunities. They confirmed today that Toronto hired Chris Overholt, who's the former head of the Canadian Olympic Committee. Like he's one of the most decorated people in all of sports in Canada, and he now runs the Toronto Overwatch League team. He's their CEO. Like it's a big deal, and that is because they were creative. They did go find other investors. They did kind of build out this network because every time you bring in one of these venture capital groups or one of these billionaires, you come up with these connections that are to them. So like the DC team, for example, they said in their press release today that one of their supporters or whatever was their official word is Events DC. Events DC owns 1/3 of an arena that's built in St. Elizabeth right now. That arena was built with esports in mind. It's for the Washington Mystics and the Capital City Go-Go, which are the WNBA, the G League teams in DC. But like they're hosting Red Bull Battlegrounds here in November. And the fact that they're even affiliated with the DC team makes it pretty clear that like that arena is probably going to be where the DC team plays when they geolocate. And so you have all these very like creative solutions where last year I feel like you didn't. It was just either endemic esports teams taking on more money to buy this slot or non-endemics who just had billions.
Well, I mean, I think because of this creativity, we're seeing 8 teams. We were talking 4 to 6 teams not that long ago, and we weren't actually sure if we were going to get to 6. But going to 8, I almost feel like they potentially could have added more, and they just decided to cut off at 8. Because one thing we don't see here is we don't see a Korean team here, and we did see somebody post an article about, or some type, is it a post or an article here that it's actually a tweet from Overwatch Nairi that the Korean team was close, but they just didn't get the deal done in time to, I guess, make it into season 2. So it sounds like at least season 3 we'll definitely see another Korean team in the next expansion. But yeah, so 8 teams, that's pretty impressive. Clearly Overwatch League season 1 was a success and people saw it as a success, and Blizzard's sales teams could obviously, or Overwatch League sales team had the ability to sell to even more people. And the fact that there's 3 new Chinese teams, people are probably wondering why are there so many new Chinese teams, or maybe in the back of their heads they're wondering, even though they kind of know that there's a lot of people there. The main reason, guys, is because half the viewership came from China for Overwatch League, so it completely makes sense that China would be obviously a huge market for Overwatch League, and there should be a lot of teams there.
I think what's really interesting, you were talking about the other Asian teams, is you have to think about money and the way people spend money. So I wrote a column on this in February, and I think it's still very true to this day, is a lot of your investors that buy into this are from 3 nationalities. And they are either American, Chinese, or Middle Eastern, or I guess 3 ethnicities. And the reason that is because, one, they tend to have a higher wealth than a lot of the other smaller countries. The more people you have in the country, the more you can, I guess, produce commerce and produce demand for whatever product you sell, whether that be a streaming website or whether that be arenas that you're hosting and you're selling tickets and whatever it may be, right? And so those investors tend to, one, have a lot more money. And that's why you see, like, the Paris team is owned by an American, right? The London team owned by Americans. It's why there's a problem in Europe, because Europe are smaller countries. The football teams in Europe are not massively wealthy. They are, but they're worth a lot, but like not all of them are. Only the really top of the line in each country are. And therefore it presents this kind of different investment mentality when you have less money and when you're more conservative with how you spend it. That is not the case in America, because venture capital, things in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and surrounding areas is like the mindset is we spend a lot and we hope to make a return. In China, it's very similar. They have a lot of wealth, and they like to kind of put it wherever they may be. In this case, there are 3 Overwatch teams. In the Middle East, there were definitely some Middle Eastern buyers who negotiated with Blizzard and were in some of the thick of these discussions, and there were last season as well. Didn't work out, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised next year if we saw a Middle Eastern team in like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, because they also have a lot of wealth from oil and other industries. So in Europe and other parts of Asia, you heard rumors of like Bangkok. There was definitely a group talking about that. It was a money issue at the end. You heard rumors of Busan. You heard rumors of Melbourne. All of that came down to money. Like it strictly came down to like, how can we structure this to make sure we can afford it without really hurting our business? And it's much harder in other parts of the world that aren't the U.S. Or Canada. Even Canada is a little shaky in certain parts, but like the U.S., China, and the Middle East, those are really the only 3 places I think where Overwatch League buyers will come from.
All right, Jacob, you broke down kind of the why we got the teams that we have in this current, this next season. We got 8 new teams at the $35 to $60 million range. You kind of talked about the why. Let's talk about the emotional piece. There's a huge elephant in the room that we have to discuss here. Maybe 2 elephants, but number 1 for me, and you're seeing this all over Reddit and social media right now, is the lack of European teams. Obviously, season 1, we only had 1 European team with London. Season 2, we're praising our lucky stars that we got another European team. I think Paris is a great choice given how many talented French players there are in the scene, but only 1 new European team added to the list, where we have 3 more in China, a couple more in North America. Obviously, for all the reasons you discussed previously, there's a lot less VC money floating around in Europe right now. The countries are individually a lot smaller than, for instance, China or the US, but it still sucks to be a European fan for season 2 and see this list of 8 teams with only 1 European team in there, given just how much of the Overwatch player base and fan base is European in the end. It's kind of a bummer. So, we talked about the why, but let's get a little bit of emotions run out here. It does kind of suck to see that there's only 1 European team, right?
It does suck. And I think that the Overwatch League did themselves kind of a retrospective disservice by selling London almost the entire country of England. Because then like there's a little bit harder when you sell it in someone's region. You saw the first time this has been seen publicly is the whole fan meet thing that the Spitfire wanted to do in Seoul, and that they had to get permission because the Dynasty owned the regional rights, right? So there are regional rights that cover a part of it, and the Spitfire own almost all of England. A lot of the people that I think you'll be seeing investing in esports in the next 18 months in Europe are British, or they're British organizations funded by Americans, funded by Middle Eastern investors, right? You think of like Manchester City, they have their investment group, City Football Group, is from the Middle East. You think of Manchester United, the people in these EPL teams, like they're funded by people who own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and live in New York. You think of Fulham, also owned by the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of these English Premier League teams have a ton of money, and I would expect many of them to invest within the next 18 months into something. And unfortunately, by selling their entire region to one team, you essentially have kept yourself from doing it in the future. And you can't sell other cities in England very easily. You can, but not easily.
So how many teams are we talking about in the end, for Overwatch League? We're not going to have 100 Overwatch League teams, right? So, is that really an issue? Given that we have to look at market too, right? Like where the actual Overwatch League market is now. Hopefully in the future, we have everybody in the world, right, watching Overwatch League and our Overwatch fans. But right now, they're obviously taking a look at how the market's distributed globally too. And that's kind of what I was saying about, China, right? Clearly half the viewership comes from China. So, there should be obviously more teams in China because of that. In Europe, I don't know what that looks like in Europe. Like maybe it isn't as high as we think it is, and that might be a reason. Again, it doesn't mean that like in the future it won't be, but maybe just currently right now, to me, honestly, Jacob, like I would think it would be weird to have like multiple UK teams right now. That would seem weird to me, even though I know there's a lot of football teams there, like soccer teams there, but it would just seem strange to me to have like two teams in the UK. That would when Europe's so big, like
they did. So I want to make it very clear. Blizzard tried to get the rest of Europe. I saw people from German organizations at the suite level of the Barclays Center in July. And they were like, put it this way, G2 Esports was there, and they were in discussion for Berlin at one point, and it didn't work out in the end, obviously. All the teams are confirmed for the next season. And they tried to sell in the Nordic region. Pete Vlastelica gave an interview that published this morning with the Washington Post where he said Europe is next. And he's like, we have to focus on it. He's like, China was this year and Europe is next. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're going this next year. So this year in expansion is still, I feel, running off the hype of the Overwatch League. Last year was nothing but hype. Anyone who bought an Overwatch League team among the first 12 was literally just over the moon with hype. And the reason that is because there was no product. You couldn't sell against a product. There was nothing to show someone. All there was a deck of like, here's who we're hiring. This is what we want to do. This is what it looks like. All there were decks. This year, you have your first production. You have what it looked like at Barclays, which was great. You have what it looked like in Burbank and LA, which was also great. And so now you can sell someone on like, look, we're building this burgeoning thing. This year, the Overwatch League spent a lot more money than they anticipated on production, on marketing. They went way over their budget. The way their revenue sharing pool works is that they have to cover their own costs before the teams get paid. They couldn't do that this year. Teams are not going to get a payout this year, right? The first 12. And to be clear, like they sold a lot of sponsorships. The Overwatch League is so much better at selling sponsorships than literally any other league in esports.
Oh, really?
They were doing some of their deals are almost 3 times the amount of what Riot Games is selling for the North American LCS. They are great at that. They had something like 11 sponsors throughout the season. And they're not small deals. You have people like HBO and Intel spending $10 to $20 million on some of these things for 2 years. A lot of these deals are structured to be 2-year deals, and I'm very curious what happens when they expire. Do people like HBO and do people like Twitch, right? Do people like ESPN? Do they feel like, to be clear, I don't work in the programming side of ESPN, but like, do these companies, all of them, when these deals expire, do they feel like they're worth renewing? Do they feel like the Overwatch generates enough viewership to actually lead people to their product, to get them to sign up for Spotify, to get them to buy HBO and products, to get them to buy Intel processors, whatever it may be, right? Do they feel like that's worth it? And that's why Season 3 expansion, to me, is so different, because right now it's hard to tell. I think everybody expected the Overwatch League to be in the red in the first season. They expected them to spend way more money than they should have. They went way over their budget, and they couldn't, it's not only those franchise fees that are helping pay for that, it's Activision Blizzard's own money as well. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. So next time, this time next year, when they're on their summer trek or their road show was what they call it, where they do their little tour around the world and they pitch people, I think a lot of people are going to be digging for information on what the sponsor thinks. Because if the sponsors are out, I don't think expansion in Season 3 is going to go very well. But if the sponsors renew and even more money, and the streaming broadcast rights go from $90 million with Twitch, maybe to $100 million plus for multiple years, I think that a lot of people will be interested. And I think because of the way European investors think in particular, that they need to see that return. Because they aren't super big capital, and a lot of the football teams in particular in Europe are partly government owned or partly owned by the people, right? And they are very big fan service types of folks. Mm-hmm. And so it's incredibly important that there is some sort of financial stability. Right now that does not exist, and there's a lot of people in China and the US that are willing to take the bets on that one, that it will one day exist and get in at a smaller price and make a bigger return in the end. But I think a lot of these people are playing the wait and see game.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about sponsorship revenue and other forms of revenue actually flowing into the league. Because my initial gut reaction when I heard that 8 teams had been confirmed at the higher price point of $35 to $60 million is those teams that signed up for year one that took that big $20 million risk are probably grinning ear to ear right now, because their $20 million investment is now potentially worth 1.5, 2x, even 3x the amount that they initially paid for it, if they do if they're considering it like an investment that they might eventually sell, or just an asset that they own. So in my head, I'm thinking, wow, these guys have got to be really happy, and I'm sure that they are right now. But I think your point about looking at sponsorship and alternative forms of revenue moving into Season 3, I think that's a very, very good point, that if those forms of revenue don't really materialize, are we going to see $35 million buy-ins? Are we even going to see $20 million buy-ins? But right now, certainly, it's looking like those investments have paid off for Season 1 teams.
Yeah. I think that overall, there are 2 types of owners in the Overwatch League. I think you have what I call the legacy owners, the ones that own sports teams for years and years, and they pass them down children to children. Those are the Kraft family, the Cronkies, Comcast Spectacors of the world, where they aren't venture capital companies that like to flip assets, right? They like to keep them, and they like to have them. It's part of their name that keeps them incredibly relevant and with different audiences, right? Like the Kraft family, if you're not a football fan and I would say MLS fan, but definitely if you're not a football fan, Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft aren't on your radar. They're known because they're in the Patriots, right? And they're known because every time the Patriots raise Super Bowl trophy, they're right there on stage with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why Overwatch is appealing, because this is a fan base that doesn't watch football. It's a fan base that doesn't watch soccer in some cases. They are now, as companies, have a huge audience reach to a much younger audience. The Kraft family are now relevant because of the Boston Uprising to these people that are in esports. Same thing with the Cronkies with the Gladiators. Same thing with Spectacor with the Fusion. So they're the legacy owners. I think they won't flip these assets unless something dire happens, right? Unless they go to hell and the league bankrupts or something. If that's probably the worst case scenario with a very small percentage. If that ever were to happen, that would probably be the only time you see people liquidating their assets like that. But then you have your venture capital companies, people like Immortals, your people like Energy, your new people like the DC team and the way that they're structured, your new people like the Toronto team and the Atlanta teams. They like to sell assets. They like to flip businesses and make them for more. And I don't think now's the time to cash out, but the higher the buy-in prices get year over year and the more valuable and rare these assets get, your asset increases. That's why it's important to know the buy-in prices if you're an existing owner that bought in last year. Because what if one day we get to $100 million, $200 million buy-ins and you only spent 20? Well, you can turn around and sell yours. It's already established.
Right, exactly.
And that's why, and it's a separate, that's one of the parts of the Overwatch League that's interesting. It's a separate entity. It is a separate entity. It has a separate name. Part of that reason is because if you were to sell your other organization, like say Immortals were to sell Immortals and MIBR, but didn't want to sell the Valiant, they could do that. or vice versa. They wanted to just sell the Valiant, but they didn't want to sell Immortals or MIBR. That's the benefit of it being a completely separate entity, is you don't have to do any of that weird rebranding. It's already there. So if you're, the Valiant or the Gladiators or whatever it may be, any of the existing teams, and you get to a point where these things are selling for 200 million, you can sell your thing for more than 200 million, because the people buying into at 200 million are only buying a slot. You can sell your thing. It's an organization. You have a house. You have a complex. You have whatever you may be that you've established over the years. You can sell it for 250, 300, 400, whatever it may be, right? It's a valuable asset at that point.
Yeah.
And so there are two different types of owners. I think the ones that want to keep it forever and want it to be a part of their family business portfolio for a long time. And then there's people that want to flip the asset. And I think there's both in the Overwatch League.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see that crazy increase in value, for these spots until, we'll definitely be seeing the increase up and up. But the moment that they actually stop, taking in a bunch of teams and the existing spots are obviously become somewhat of the only spots available moving forward, then I think that's when you'll start seeing these flipping opportunities come up for some of these teams, and maybe crazy amounts of money being offered, and we actually see some folks actually take these businesses up on it. But okay, well, anyways, why don't we move on? We still got a lot to talk about, obviously, this show. So why don't we talk about just a bunch of Overwatch League player additions and releases? Obviously, mostly releases, given that all this whole signing period for each of the teams expired. So basically, all the teams had to either protect the players that they wanted this season, or they had to basically release them. And we saw basically every team make some changes in regards to releasing players. And I don't know, Ben, you want to kind of go through each of them, and then we can kind of. I'll bring up the.
We don't even have enough time in the show to really analyze every single move here, so I'm going to just read through what's been announced so far. It's mainly a lot of players have been released. We haven't seen any signings, really. I think one of the only kind of transfers that has been announced so far is Fissure is going from the Gladiators to Seoul Dynasty, which I think that happened after our last show.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just a ton of people being dropped, which is, Bible thumps in the chat. Everyone's sad about it because, a lot of these legacy players and legacy teams are no more. But I'm just going to go ahead and run through what we have so far. The Shanghai Dragons, unsurprisingly, released 8 of their players. The players that are still on the team, Geguri, Fearless, and Dia. I think this is an interesting one because you'd certainly expect Addo out of anyone to be like one of the players that they would keep. So I'm curious to see where Addo goes for sure. Mayhem dropped the majority of their team, and we actually are going to have the Chief Gaming Officer from the Florida Mayhem coming on the show later today to kind of talk about that. So much more coming down the road on that one. Seoul Dynasty. This one it was kind of like not really super surprising, but still a big shock to see Miro drop from the team before Overwatch League Season 1. A lot of people said Miro's the best main tank in the game, and he certainly had a very disappointing season. Guido and Wakid have also been dropped. No big surprises there for me. Those two definitely underperformed this season as well. Shock with maybe the least surprising roster news probably of the offseason so far. Dak, Nomi, and IDDQD have been dropped. Of course, IDDQD played one game the entire season. Gladiators let go of Irimix, Asher, and Silk Thread. This one is interesting to me because that leaves Gladiators with just Hydration and Surefour on the DPS role. So I'm curious to see if they're going to be adding any DPS players during the offseason. NYXL drops Janice. Not a big surprise there either. Fusion drops Shadowburn, Joe Meister, and Dayfly. Not a huge surprise about Joe Meister and Dayfly. Shadowburn really didn't get a lot of play this season. And it just makes you wonder, is Shadowburn even, can he find a starting spot on any roster? I mean, obviously we have 8 teams coming into the next season of OWL, but really curious to see if he's going to make it into an OWL team or if he'll be in Contenders next season. We don't really know that. Outlaws drop Fact Fiction. Mendo and Clockwork will take on new roles, with Mendo being a streamer and Clockwork taking on more of a coaching role. Fuel drops Chipsgen, Chip Cyan, and Coco will move to a coaching role. And I want to point this one out because for me, this is the biggest surprise and kind of weirdest release is Boston the Boston Uprising drop Mistakes. If you didn't watch super closely, I'll just give you a refresher. Mistakes came in the clutch. He was never supposed to be a starter for this Boston Uprising team. But after all of the drama last season, Boston needed to put him into that starter spot. And when Mistakes came in as a starter for Boston, they went undefeated in stage 3, I believe it was, with him starting every single game during that stage. So the fact that Mistakes is dropped from Boston, I think, for me personally, is like one of the biggest surprises on this list. What do you guys think? Any highlights or things you want to comment on here?
I just want to make it clear kind of like what's happening in this period, right? And because I think this was another thing that wasn't very well communicated when these players signed contracts. These standard Overwatch League player contracts, so like they all differ depending on who wrote, which lawyer wrote the contract. However, there is like a standard set of things you have to have in your contract, healthcare, whatever, like healthcare and retirement. One that's very interesting to me is second-year options. There's a big thing in sports, and it was not very highlighted in the Overwatch League. So essentially, you sign what's called a 1+1 if you're an Overwatch League player last year, where you have a 1-year contract, and then you have an option to pick it up for the second one. This period that you're in right now is people not getting their option picked up. It's a team option. So the team can choose whether to retain you or release you. You cannot choose to leave in most cases, right? So this most of this is team done. What's interesting about that is I don't think this is what's the last stuff that's going to happen. I think there will be teams that pick up options and trade players. I think there will be them that they say like we're gonna. So then you don't have to renegotiate the salary on that second year. You just pick up the option and then ship them out.
Yeah,
that was a contract.
That was a big question, right? Everyone was like wondering, why aren't any of these people, particularly, folks like Shadowburn or maybe even Mistakes, like why aren't they being traded, for whatever value? And so, I mean, obviously there are some questions there, but I think you make a good point. Like even the people that are still on the rosters, we will see a trading period. And so like right now we're in the period where the expansion teams, right, basically get to choose players, I think, at this point.
Yeah, that is on that is on Sunday, is the day that opens.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And also what's intriguing about that is I don't want to make any allegations against specific people, but I've been hearing a little bit about this, that there are teams that want players immediately rather than letting them, because there's like a month period where you can only expansion teams can sign players, right?
Oh.
There are teams that want players on other teams, and rather than releasing said player into free agency and then signing him and the chance of him potentially signing on his own to a expansion team in that month period where maybe they show up and offer him a bunch of money, these teams are talking about one picking up an option and then trading him to another. So if there's like a player on one team, they pick up the option and trade him to the other one, and that's how you get the player. That's how you avoid potentially losing a player to an expansion team. And this
fascinating. Wow.
So it's, smart. I mean, totally.
And
smart.
it saves money for everyone involved too,
course,
because like there will be like I want people in Overwatch to start using this term. It's a big thing in traditional sports. Cash considerations. We traded a player for cash considerations. I really want that to be a thing. And I think it's funny because like if you're a team like Seoul, right, and you have some good individual talent, but you never gelled well, and you want to trade away one of your players to another Korean team, or you want to trade them away to another team, period, you can pick up the option. You can make money from taking the cash consideration from the trading team. You can also ship out the player, and the buying team saves money because they are paying a lower salary that was negotiated last year rather than this year.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And he's just protected too. So, I mean, it's like a guarantee that this is going to happen.
Correct.
Yeah, so
I do agree with Mistakes, though. Yeah. Generally. Like,
well, Mistakes.
That was surprising me.
I think Mistakes is an interesting thing because, like, I think that we might be in a situation where we're thinking of Mistakes from months ago, and the last time we saw Mistakes was in World Cup. The last stage of World Cup, and I have to say Mistakes played just so during that. I don't know what happened with practice or whatnot with the World Cup team, but I feel like he might not have done himself favors just with how he performed there. He had moments, but I think it was more like Shadowburn doing crazy stuff. But so it could be a classic case of just currently he just isn't the same player, at least on the same level. And Contenders has been amazing. We've seen some extremely good players in Contenders right now. So I think that we're going to see this huge influx of Contenders players moving into these Overwatch League teams. And also, with this season, we have these flex positions now. Like we have these spots on the teams where players are signed to play. They're signed I think they're signed as Contenders players, but they can play up in the Overwatch League.
Two-way contracts.
Yeah, two-way contracts. Exactly. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, so we're going to be seeing a lot more of that too. So, I think that's probably what happened. Mistakes. Shadowburn, I actually don't know. Like I feel like Shadowburn has trade value. So to be honest, I was a little surprised that Fusion dropped him. I don't think he's going to start. I still think he would have probably, still would be a bench player for them. But I mean, I don't know. Am I wrong about that? Shadowburn in World Cup looked amazing. He just looked like the magical World Cup player that he always is. And Genji-wise, he's always going to be one of the best Genjis in the world.
I think his Pharah is probably the most underrated part of his repertoire for sure. He could be a Pharah specialist for any team in the league, probably. But question is Pharah even that good in the meta right now? Right now, unless you're playing against GOATs, doesn't really seem like the answer is yes. Yeah,
but that can change in a hurry, man. That's like one update.
Yeah, of course.
It's
one patch
different.
will change that completely. Yeah. But I think given all these players who've been released in our discussion of Contenders and the 8 new teams in Overwatch League, I would pose the question: is there enough talent in terms of player talent to fill out 8 more teams, 8 more quality teams? This has been a discussion point in the news and on social media, because in season 1 we had teams like Shanghai and Chris, I'm sorry, we had teams like Florida that really were kind of in the doldrums for most of the entire season. You're from Florida.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so like, are there really enough talented players to fill out 8 teams? I mean, I think you're right, Chris. Contenders has shown a lot of up and coming talent, but I think it's an interesting question to ponder.
I think what's interesting from that, and I have not started doing a lot of roster reporting at this time, I think a lot of it is very premature. I think there's a lot of information out there that's being shared. This always happens in Overwatch because it's a younger game too than League or Counter-Strike. There's always a lot of misinformation that's spread very early in these processes before, like, look, they can negotiate right now, but no one can sign a contract till Sunday. So like when you're hearing all these rumors, it's like no one's put their pen to paper. Remember that. What's intriguing is I think a lot of the Chinese teams in particular will go with either full sale Korean teams,
runaway
contender. Also some like X6 and others I think will be some of those that are looked at.
Sure.
I mean, Runaway did. Flowervin said they had multiple offers, so it would not surprise me if those are some of the Chinese teams. I think that so they'll either buy wholesale or they'll hire a Korean manager to build for them. Right? I think that's probably the way a lot of the Chinese teams will go. Domestically here in the U.S. And Canada and the Paris team, the western part of the world, I actually think that many of them will probably build ground up. I don't know how many of them will actually buy wholesale. They've hired managers that have worked and coaches who have worked in Contenders and other leagues. I mean, there are reports out there which I can say are true, that Steffi will be going to Atlanta and that Kate Mitchell will be going to DC. And that I've heard the Kai one to Vancouver, but I'm not sure if that ever got done. I know there was an offer. And so you have these people who have built teams from scratch before, and I'm wondering how many of them will go wholesale and buy teams from Contenders. I would say the majority of them will not, and they will build themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we have like mixed results, obviously, with the whole buying complete teams, right, in season 1. I mean, obviously we had Seoul, and then London was like 2 teams basically, and then they had their issues even just having 2 teams. So I don't even know if I count London to a degree, but Seoul, and then we had Dallas too. I mean, it just didn't. I wouldn't say it was a successful strategy. I mean, we even Mayhem too, right? Like I don't think in overall, like I don't think either those 3 teams didn't compete really in the end. So, building ground up, right now, I think might be still more of a proven strategy, and you just have more players to look at. I mean, it's just even from the standpoint of the availability of the player pool. I mean, it's just better to be able to look at a ton of players versus just, a set team, I would say. So definitely risks, and there's risks on both ends of it, but I would say building from scratch seems to have been very successful for a lot of teams so far. Any other surprises on this list? I mean, I think that, one thing that's kind of interesting is just the coaching kind of moves, like moving Coco to coaching, and we see, as well as Clockwork to coaching, which is, Clockwork was obviously a pretty big talking point for the Outlaws this entire season. So, I guess, finally moving up to, or at least moving out of a player role into that. Who else was moved to coach here? I think those are the only two, right?
Well, I think one of the big ones is Spitfire's coach departed the team as well. So even teams that were very successful, and then guys like Wizard Young from NYXL also were released. So even some of the more successful teams are seeing shakeups, not just in their players but also their coaches.
Yeah, which is huge. I mean, we've seen very big differences in how the teams perform once coaches move. We saw a little bit of that with Boston when when we had a coaching switch there, and then obviously Dallas, we saw a huge change in Dallas once Arrow got there too at the end of the season. So, don't underestimate coaching changes. Those are actually just as important as player changes. In some ways, even more important.
They help assemble these rosters, right? And I think that. I think that many of these teams are now starting to make that decision or have already made that decision very rapidly. I mean, it's on her Twitter, so I'm not really saying anything. Kate Mitchell was posting that she was in New York last week, and she's already hired and working for the DC team, which has a New York-based office. So it's pretty quick and rapid, I think. It's
well, it has to be. I mean, we're talking. I mean, not only do they have to build the teams right now, I mean, they have to be ready to move to the cities in the summer, like in summer, fall next year. So all of these new teams, GMs and owners and everything, I mean, they're going to have to be moving super quick.
It's why they're staffing out so heavily, though.
Yeah.
That's why you see people like Chris Overholt hired for Toronto, one of these very prestigious businessmen that's connected and worked all over the damn Canadian sports, Canadian sports landscape, because it's important that the business people figure out the geolocation thing by January 2020, and it's important that the players are good enough to keep these new teams relevant. And so it's I think that a lot of these expansion teams are playing catch up. Atlanta in particular got a pretty early. Atlanta and Guangzhou got a pretty early head start because their paperwork was done first. So they've had about a month extra to kind of go find their staff. Work on their business, figure out team names. I mean, a month is a long time.
It is.
This process,
sure.
Whereas some of these owners didn't know they were in the league till last week. So it's they weren't for sure in until last week. So it's some of this is a little bit more rapid. I think some teams are further advanced, and I would say Atlanta and Guangzhou and maybe some of the Chinese teams are a little bit further advanced than Vancouver, who I've not heard much about aside from coach and maybe manager. Just I think that of all the U.S. teams, if I had to do an early prediction, then I'm putting a big bet on Seffi by saying this. I think they'll probably be very good because he's had a head start and he knows what he's doing. So.
Okay, I guess last bit of news just with Overwatch League in terms of these kind of players or just the league itself is Benchmob. Benchmob's been obviously reporting a lot of different things the last couple of weeks, but one thing that he did mention that was kind of interesting was that the playoff structure seems to have changed, or reportedly is going to be changing. So it's going to be 6 from just from the final standings. But then there's going to be this whole concept of a play-in tournament at the end of the season for 2 of the spots in the playoffs, which is really interesting because then it makes I don't know, it just makes the end of the season, I guess, a little bit more interesting than I guess it was this year. And just more teams would just maybe get a chance to get in, and I think that's pretty exciting, and even at least from a broadcasting standpoint, and just keeping it really again, not having this real stale moment before the playoffs and before the grand finals we had a little bit this season. So what do you guys think of that, this new playoff system?
I want to put a small asterisk on it real quick before we actually get into it.
Sure.
So I don't think any format changes for next season are finalized. And
Oh yeah, sure, of course. They're just kind of.
I think they're
reporting
open for discussion.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to know that they're open for discussion. The Blizzard holds 2 to 3 days of ownership meetings right before BlizzCon in Beverly Hills. And so I think that's when a lot of that will be decided.
Right.
Will be right around BlizzCon. We'll start hearing a little bit more about like what's actually happening, because that will be. I think BlizzCon will probably be the first time. At least those meetings before BlizzCon will be the first time that you see all 20 owners in the same room. Or like we won't be able to go in the room, but it will be the first time they all see each other and have like a thorough discussion. And like the expansion teams haven't had time to weigh in on it. So like I know there are format discussions being talked about. I know this is definitely one of them. But I don't think we'll know anything for certain, even from like a reporting perspective, because I think they won't announce till probably end of November, beginning of December for format. But like we won't know for certain what they lock in until beginning of November.
Yeah, I mean, I think more playoff action is better than less.
Yeah,
I would say that I think I know why you're chuckling at, Chris, but I think I would say that this season they didn't do a great job of hyping up the playoffs as well as they could have. But next season, I'm really crossing my fingers that they try and hype up the playoffs a bit more, maybe even do them in different arenas, like in different parts of the country or even different parts of the world. I think just something as simple as going to a 5,000 person capacity arena versus the 500 capacity arena in Burbank would be enough to elevate the hype of the playoffs a bit more. So beyond anything, I just hope that they give the playoffs like a little bit more of a specialty treatment rather than it kind of looking and feeling similar to how the regular season did.
I mean, even
that's a format discussion too. I was going to say the travel thing you bring up is super interesting. I don't know if it will be for playoffs next year, but they definitely discuss going to other countries. And like because these teams are going to eventually one day travel and geo-locate, they want to kind of like give those fans kind of like a taste test of what that looks like. So I definitely could see them like going to England and going to Korea throughout the Overwatch season next year, and like having those kind of like special weeks where they like go somewhere else.
It's just season-ending stuff, right? All those season finals should be somewhere else. Anything outside of the studio would be great. And it's not easy to make that happen. And you'll have to work with production companies for that instead of obviously having it all in house. So it is a lot more work, and logistics are a lot more difficult. But it's going to be worth it in terms of growing, or just keeping the entire season exciting and continuing the interest in it. Okay, well, let's move on to World Cup talk. This week we're going to be going in, actually right now, we're going into the U.S. group. So they're already, playing away right now. I think Canada's playing right now. But figured we would talk about it, given that we talked about the last groups during our last show. So let me bring it up. While we're bringing it up, what do you guys think? It's U.S., Canada, Austria, Brazil, Norway, Switzerland. Is that it? Yeah, those are the 6 teams, right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's no way that you can look at this and say it's not just going to be US and Canada. Right. I think the one storyline people are looking at is, can Brazil turn some heads? Norway has like 1 or 2 players that and you've seen on contenders teams. Like Switzerland and Norway, I think are going to be decent. I don't know much about the Austria team, but like you can't really look at this group and say anything other than US and Canada are going to go through. Right.
What's really fascinating to me is that Brazil feels like, and it's always felt like this for probably the last 5 years, Brazil always feels like it's the like 3rd or 4th country in the western part of the world, or like the Americas, that always has a chance to actually be pretty good at esports. And I'm really curious if some of these players perform and then pop up in some of these expansion talks. I really want to see how they do.
It's true. Yeah, that's like the World Cup. It's like the best thing ever about the Overwatch World Cup is that it can shine a light on players that you probably never would have seen before. And that's why we have Mickey in the Overwatch League. That's why there's a number of players that have been found. Yeah. EQO. Yeah. Jake, with his performance last year in the World Cup. So I'd love to see that. And you're right. Brazil is one of the best countries in the world at CS:GO. They have many championships have gone to Brazilian teams. So, hope to see it.
And in League, like they're the always, aside from like the 5 major regions, they're always like the they don't call them wild cards anymore, but wild card regions that are like the best. They're always one of the top 10, them in Turkey. So like there's pretty good like growing esports infrastructure in that country. I'm wondering what type of players they produce and how they do today.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a boring group, to be honest. I mean, outside of that, obviously the players being able to prove themselves, it's a little bit of luck then, right? Because given these signing periods, you're gonna be benefit if your country is playing early on in this World Cup versus the latter groups down here, which I'm not sure when like France is being played. So what's the date on the France one? It's like the 21st. Oh, I guess it's still within signing periods. So maybe if you can make some last minute decisions, based on this group here, which is a lot more interesting in my opinion. But what's funny about the planning of the broadcast is the US-Canada match is the very last match in this group, which it's like, oh man, it's like Sunday night. I was hoping they would pick it in a more prime spot, but I guess you have to kind of wait because I don't think there's going to be any kind of deciding aspect to that, in terms of who gets through. So won't be. I don't think it'll be that climactic, but it will be interesting to see who wins between the two, because I feel like Canada right now is coming in. I mean, Canada's the favorite, right? Wouldn't you say? Like I feel like they're coming in as the favorite. USA, a lot of people they know the players, they think they're solid, but there's still a little bit of an unknown, as to like how this US team is going to play together and how well they're going to do. But Canada, yeah, I think they're proven. A lot of those players have played last year. And I think they're just a favorite to win the whole thing, the World Cup.
I wonder if the decision to put it on Sunday was in hopes to hit more weekend viewers, just because like we saw even at the main World Cup stage, the best match at World Cup last year, the most entertaining match, I don't want to say best overall in skill, was Korea USA, and had a ton of viewers on a Friday night. And I feel like if they would have put that on Saturday, they would have probably even had even more if they put it on Saturday prime time. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering if that's part of the reason they do put Canada and USA on a Sunday, because it's the day that everybody's kind of just home and not working. And I wonder if what happened last year with their schedule kind of impacted the way they think this year in programming.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting even just to see what the general strategy is in terms of scheduling these things, or if they have to take that into account, right? There's no way they save that one for the end there. Okay, well, anyways, we'll take a look. Oh, one last thing about the World Cup. I mean, there's all these like these uniform reveals, and we're seeing these videos and these people tweeting about it. But guys, I mean, these uniforms are terrible. I mean, that's at least my opinion of it. It's like, can't they be better than just like this? Let me bring some of these up. They're mostly white. They're I don't know. They could be so much better than they are. And I think Canada's is pretty much the same as it was last year, right? Like I kind of vaguely remember them looking like that. Like there's Canada's. Yeah. I mean, the US one's I think worse than it was last year. I don't know. Any thoughts? Any fashion thoughts on this?
The US ones are pretty awful.
I mean,
I don't care that much.
Come on, man. Oh, it's loud. Sorry about it. This tweet had a volume on it. Yeah, so take a look at these. I mean, that doesn't even look like US to me. That looks like a Czech uniform.
It looks very T-Mobile, though. I will say it looks very on brand with their jersey sponsor.
I guess, man.
But I don't like it. I don't like the jerseys this year, and there's a larger discussion to be had about esports merchandise just being awful. But I think that this certainly is not very good.
Yeah. He's like, look at this. I mean, that doesn't even look like Canada. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's red and white. That's about all it is. That's Canada.
Oh boy.
About it. Yeah.
Have you seen the Paris ones yet?
No. The French ones? No.
Yeah, they're gonna be like that, but red, white, and blue.
Red, white, and blue.
Could be like white in the middle, blue on the right, and
Exactly. All right. Well, anyways, I figured we just mention that a little bit. All right, contenders. So we're gonna go into contenders, and then we're gonna have Joe pop on here in about 5 minutes. So get ready for some mayhem talk in a second. But Ben, you obviously want to talk a little bit about NA Finals contenders.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm really glad that Blizzard decided to stack the Contenders Finals also at the same venue, at the same event as Overwatch League. Contenders, in my opinion, has really, really great quality players, really great, really high caliber teams. So it's great to see that Contenders is going to be at an event like World Cup. So this weekend, we have the Contenders NA Finals happening in LA. In fact, I believe they happen tonight, and it's going to be Fusion University versus XL2. It's been a little bit since we actually saw the Contenders playoffs. So, the meta has shifted. Hammond's in there. Really not sure what we're going to see. Are we going to see a lot of goats? I think anything could happen. Honestly, these teams, I feel, will be very evenly matched. But if I personally had to give a prediction, I would put my money on XL2 to take this home. They've got just such an incredible amount of talent, and they've got more Korean players. So I think that's gonna potentially give them an edge. I think guys like Nene have been like mind-blowingly good. Like Nene's gonna be in Overwatch League next season for sure. So I would put my money there. They've also got Nanohana, previously known as Flower. So I think XL2's got that.
Probably the most coveted player in all of Contenders for next year.
Is he still the most coveted player? Like
I would say he's one of them.
I mean, obviously a lot of that came from World Cup last year, and I haven't seen Flower play that much, to be honest, like this last year. So I don't know. Have you, Ben? Have you seen Flower play a bunch? Like
I hate to say it, it's been so long since the playoffs that like I'm trying to like jog my memory of who exactly was playing throughout those playoffs. Yeah.
I mean, he was literally considered possibly the best player in the world after World Cup last year. So like his stock was by far the highest. Like it's really a shame that he couldn't sign with any team. But actually, I don't know about that. Maybe his contract wouldn't be that much more or less. I don't know. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting.
He's
Jacob,
not played
you say
playoffs
that.
though. You're right. He played very like sporadically in playoffs. He played him and Megachu, from what I'm looking at, switched out a lot and throughout the series against Energy, and then the same with Mayhem Academy as well. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I actually think his stock's not that high. Actually, I mean he'll make it into Overwatch League. I don't think that's any question, but I don't see him starting for anybody from what I've heard so far, like in terms of how he's been playing.
Hard to say.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll definitely.
Pretty unfortunate when you're not old enough to sign up for Overwatch League. Because if he would have been able to last year, he would have made a ton of money. It's like
it's like a basketball player having to go to college for a year.
Because you look at the league last year, and like Siegel and Sinatra made so much money. I wonder how much Flower would have made with like peak right after World Cup performances, and just It's like now a year later, it's a little unfortunate, but I still think he'll probably get somewhere, if not XL themselves. Just bump him up.
Yeah. Let's see. One last bit of news here, miscellaneous news here, is that our friend Mitch Uber ended up winning On-Camera Talent of the Year at the Stockholm International Esports Awards. So, I think it's well deserving. I mean, Mitch, I don't know how many epic casts he had this season, not to mention just everything he's done in the past, but like even just Overwatch League standpoint. I mean, for me, I felt like he was the most entertaining one. I mean, everybody's good, but I think Mitch just created very memorable moments, with his cast. So any thoughts on Mitch's win here?
He's a hustler, man.
Yeah,
totally.
We are lucky in esports that we have a lot of incredible casters. I mean, if you look throughout every major game, there's phenomenal casting talent in every game. There's some people who do analysis well. There's some people who keep the flow going. There's some people that really build up the hype incredibly well. I think Uber does a mix of like all of these things, but I think the thing that is really special about Uber's talent is his wordplay is, I think, on a different level. Like, I can't think of another caster who pulls out these insane, like, subtle references that if you're not endemic to the community or you're not listening very carefully, you're probably going to miss them because he's just sticking them into the middle of his super hype rap god moments all the time. I don't know how his brain works. Like, I wish I used to commentate a lot back in the day, and I'm just like blown away with how I don't understand how his brain works at all. But
I've been meaning to ask Mitch if he just has like a bunch of puns and little things already written out and ready to just use whenever, or if that's literally just on the spot wit, like that he's pulling that stuff out. Because you know that a lot of these TV broadcasts, whatever it is, it could be just whatever entertainment show or sports, whatever, you know, there's writers that feed these broadcasters some of these things, right? And sometimes they pull it off well and it seems organic, but some of it is just terribly scripted and it's very, very obvious, right? I've been meaning to ask Mitch that for a long time, whether he just like literally just comes up with everything just literally on the fly, or if he's ever planning on, you know, trying to work this into a broadcast at some point during the day.
I've definitely told him this personally, and I kind of just like want to say it for the audience. I have watched him since he cast very, very small tournaments for ESL, which was about 5 years ago.
Yep.
To see his hustle and his come up has been incredible, and the hard work that he puts into this is, I don't want to say second to none, because the Overwatch League does have pretty incredible hard workers. Monty and Doa, of course, are very well known to work very, very hard and relentlessly, but the fact that he is caught up and is on that level, I would consider him on that level to, you know, these people who have been in the industry for a long time and really are very highly touted and respected. The fact that he's caught up is incredibly impressive, and I think what he does is great. I think he seriously deserved that award.
He's one of those casters, and we've seen him, right? He's casted World of Tanks. He's casted like everything, like in the past.
League of Legends,
of course. Yeah, and he's one of those casters that can he can do anything. Like he's got that, you know, ability or that talent, you know, his voice and just his charisma and everything. So
I mean, he started with Battlefield 4 for like years.
Did he really?
So,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
He was him and Jason Kaplan casted
Battlefield 4. Really?
Those guys. I think it was at a Gamescom or something.
If you if the Overwatch League ever implodes and people are looking for jobs, I think he will have lots of phone calls.
Yeah, no question. All right. Well, I think it's time to bring Joe in on this show, because he's been waiting this whole time, just because I pretty much wanted
Patient Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Patient Joe. So let me pull him on here, and then we'll start talking to Joe. All right. Hey, Joe, can you hear us? You there? You're muted if you're...
Hello.
Hey, Joe.
There we go.
Yeah, so...
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you for sure. And actually, let me just change this
Cool.
real quick. Welcome, Joe. So for those of you that might not be familiar with Joe, this is Joe Elouassi. He is the Chief Gaming Officer for the Misfits Mayhem. And we just wanted to have Joe come on just to talk about the Mayhem. Obviously, there's been a lot going on with the Mayhem recently with the whole Zappis thing yesterday. And figured it would be great just to have, you know, Joe talk about that. But on top of that, just everything else about Mayhem, because there seems to be a bunch of misconceptions in the community with just how Mayhem's been, you know, been organized or run or whatever, you know, during this season 1. So I figured it'd be a great time to have you on, Joe, and you know, maybe get some of those things straightened out. So welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much for having me, first of all. And, you know, I just apologize if there are any kind of connection issues, as I'm currently in Madrid at the moment with our League of Legends team. So yeah, I just apologize in advance if like it cuts out at all, since I'm basically talking from my phone right now. But yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. I'm, you know, very excited to be on today, and, you know, hopefully I can shed some light onto, you know, just a little bit about how we operate, and also, you know, clear up any kind of misconceptions that we think the community may have, or, you know, anything that we feel that people should know.
Yeah, so why don't we just kind of dive into it, you know, obviously with the stuff that was happening yesterday, which was the Zappis, you know, just, you know, I feel that, yeah, you know, I think it started, well, actually it started with just I guess the announcement of just the release of the players. And then I think what followed up was the tweet about saying how the players were, you know, basically had to play for their spot. And then Zappis ended up tweeting about, you know, him not actually getting a chance to trial. So I kind of wanted to have you just kind of talk us through that and really, you know, explain maybe what actually happened there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll start by saying, you know, there were miscommunications from our side. You know, obviously Ben's tweet wasn't entirely accurate in the sense that we hadn't already trialed everyone. I mean, we have, except for Zappis, obviously, who had World Cup duties. So I guess I'll kind of describe it as a sequence of events. But, you know, first of all, I just wanted to, you know, apologize to the community for the miscommunication on that side. I just don't want that to be presented as a lie, you know, as I'll kind of explain now in this kind of sequence of events, you know, leading up to this. Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'll just kind of take it from the top, really.
Sure.
You know, a while ago we, you know, we discussed. I would say probably when it was like almost mathematically impossible for us to make it into playoffs of Overwatch League or end of season playoffs last year. You know, we discussed about, you know, what we'll do this year, and you know, really ever since then, there's been a lot going on into, you know, how we are going to rebuild this team to become competitively viable next year. So yeah, I mean, in Zappis's case specifically, just like the rest of the players, we said that well, once the season ended, we said that we will be running trials for pretty much every slot on the team. We are doing this, you know, because losing isn't really something that, you know, was ever associated with Misfits when, you know, obviously our efforts in Overwatch were with Misfits, but, you know, we didn't want that to continue on to Mayhem as well. So, you know, when you go 7-33, it is really tough, you know, and it also means that, you know, what you're doing at the moment doesn't work clearly, you know, so it required us to, you know, go back to the drawing board and talk, you know, together, you know, come up with a viable strategy to ensure that there's no repetition of that going forward. So, you know, we spoke to Jonas and we told him
Zappis,
that
by the way.
he will be able to.
Just in case people
sorry.
don't.
Yeah. So Zappis, yeah. We spoke to Zappis, and you know, we told him that he will be able to try for his slot. The unfortunate thing that happened was, you know, well, I say unfortunate, very fortunate for him. He got picked for Finland. You know, congratulations to him. It's fantastic for him. You know, it's a great responsibility, and obviously, you know, that is a big stage for him to showcase his talent. You know, a bigger stage than our trialing process, clearly. So that coincided with our trialing process, which sucked because literally everyone else on the team was able to make it. So we spoke to him and we said, okay, well, you know, focus on performing your best for Finland, you know, showcase what you can do. And, you know, obviously he's been doing fantastically for Finland. But that was our Overwatch League specific trialing period, right? You know, we're not actually done with building our Overwatch League team. It was just that trial was not going to have any players we would consider for contenders in it. So we are running, you know, a trial at a separate date. You know, after the after the World Cup, probably at the earliest opportunity we can. We can run it, and you know, that was our intent, to just trial him there. But clearly, you know, it wasn't communicated properly, and that's where we fucked up. But you know, we intended to uphold our promise to him. You know, we weren't lying about that. You know, we had every intention to do that. And then, you know, the other thing that was raised surrounding that was, you know, that he was one of the players released in the most recent round. But, you know, as I'm sure you guys all know, there was a deadline on September 2nd for us to activate the +1 on our players' contracts. And, you know, from our perspective, you know, Zappis did like a lot for us behind the scenes while he wasn't able to play much. You know, he showed a lot of strengths that we felt could have been of use to us. So in line with that, you know, we were already ready to make him an offer to work with us in that capacity. But at the same time, you know, he wouldn't have been able to do that on a player contract, first of all. And that is the offer we are ready to make now. Until we see him showcase himself in trials with us, you know, we could not necessarily say, yeah, he's going to retain his spot next year. So, you know, like, this was all, pretty unfortunate how it was portrayed, and I hope that me talking about this just clears like any misconception of what happened. But we really didn't intend for him to not be able to showcase himself at all. It's not what we intended to. But releasing him as well, also gives him a lot of options this offseason, especially with 8 new expanding teams. And for us, we really want to see all of our players that we released land on their feet. That's very important for us, which is why we're really releasing when other teams are as well. And it's no different for Zappis. But like I said, the offer we are ready to make right now was with our staff. I can't specify what that role is now, but it's a very important role to us, and a role we think Zappis will excel in if he does take that offer. So yeah, I mean, in line with that, that was why we did that.
Joe, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You all have mentioned this trial process that you've been doing with different players across different countries. If they're free agents, you can't sign them for about a month until the signing period opens for new team, or for existing teams rather than the new teams. So like,
correct.
How are you hoping to retain a player from that period of time? Say they do want to join your team, but then they get a massive offer from an expansion team in the next month. Like, how do you ensure that person that you selected through these trials actually ends up signing with the Mayhem?
I mean, like I said, our trialing process isn't complete. That was a very early indication prior to the World Cup, where a lot of the talent out there will only be able to showcase themselves, on screen rather than under our own quote unquote scrutiny, I guess. But yeah, we wanted our own initial assessment, and our plan is to be very thorough. And even that trialing process, we were running Western trials, we were running Korean trials. I can just give you a sample of what our day looked like, in that time period. We would start the Western trials at 10 a.m. Pacific, finish at 5 p.m. Pacific, with a small break to eat. Then we would get a few hours nap and start Korean trials at 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. And then get another nap and then start again, rinse, repeat, until teams wanted their players back, basically. So yeah, we intend to be as thorough as possible, and having our own early indication is valuable to us as far as like how we retain them. There's no way we could really do that without breaking the rules. We have no intention of breaking the rules. But the players we showed interest in, we told them what we're about in Florida Mayhem. We told them what we do in regards to infrastructure, and hopefully I would like to think that a lot of the players out there don't only consider the cash offer that's there, but also the cash offer that might be there further on in the off season. But if a player signs that early on as a free agent, then there's nothing stopping them. There's nothing we can really do. But then again, perhaps that might lead to us having to do, as you said earlier in the show, cash considerations later in the off season, right?
Right.
Or maybe even like a trade on our side. But that clearly, with the amount of players we released, that's not really our intention this off season. So our investment going forward, will be significant. Not that it already hasn't been, which I will explain, I guess as we go along.
Right. So just to, kind of circling back just to the Zappis thing, just to make sure we just clarify, Zappis knew about all of this stuff, right? I mean, he knew when the trial times were, and I mean, it sounded like it was basically just overlap between like World Cup, I guess, practice and that sort of stuff with the trials.
Yeah.
And he knew. I mean, he knew that, right? And it was more of a making a choice.
Sorry to interrupt. The only kind of uncertainty, which is the exact date of our Contenders trials. And I'm not sure if we described like the specifics well enough, but we did, make it clear to every single player in our roster last year that, they will get an opportunity to showcase themselves. But unfortunately, that time window for Zappis is after, the deadline for us to notify players of whether we pick up their +1, and also, we wanted him to focus on his World Cup responsibilities with Finland, which is why I can understand there was clearly a miscommunication. That's not something we want to deny at all. There definitely was, and I wanted to address that on here. I guess we didn't really expect everything to blow up as much as it has done in the last couple of days.
So like, why, I want to ask this from a communications perspective as a journalist, and I'm very interested. A lot of these teams, like, they just put out the press release players and they haven't said another damn thing. And why do you think it's like important to address it and not just let it fester?
Could you elaborate a little?
Yeah, so like for some of the other teams in the Overwatch, their players, even some of the ones that we were talking about earlier in the show, like mistakes and et cetera, that like I would love to have more explanation on to the public, right, as to the decision making. And like I think esports fans and Reddit and everything are always going to be, I mean, all sports fans are going to be like super, I guess, controversial and like mob mentality kind of thing,
emotional.
Right? Yeah, emotional,
yeah,
right?
Understood.
And so like, why, like, from your perspective, why do you think it's important to address it, period, rather than just kind of like let it happen and let it wash away in a week or two?
I mean, obviously, with fans, like, fans want as much information as possible, and I think, if we can create that kind of transparency between us and our fans, obviously there are going to be certain things that we cannot talk about, as there is for like any other professional sports team. But, I think the more transparent we can be with our fans, the better it is. And, a lot of the values that we have in Mayhem are, revolve around transparency with each other internally. And, that's something that we want to include our fans into. We have this culture, this family culture in Mayhem. And, we really see our fans who have been fantastic this season as members of that family, or extended members of our family. So it's very important for us that, we can give them the transparency they need to make them satisfied.
I'm talking about I think maybe we can move on just to talk about just the roster changes, right? You definitely talked about trials, and, I'm assuming, based on the trials, some decisions were made, based on the roster. And, you guys are keeping 3 players. You're keeping, Saya, Awesome Guy, and Tavik. And the remainder of the guys obviously are being released. So I guess talk a little bit about that. Just in terms of, I mean, you mentioned obviously it's a family, and I experienced it too. Obviously meeting you guys, and I think that's one thing the rest of the community just doesn't see as much, is really, how close like everybody was. Just all the players and all the staff and everything. Which is too bad. I really wish that the community could have seen that, because I don't think they even realized that. But talk about just losing some of these guys and. Like what that means.
I mean, in a way, I think it's very different to us to almost every single Overwatch League team, maybe with the exception of Fuel, in the sense that we had our guys before Overwatch League. We had the same roster before Overwatch League. We've been working with these guys for a long time. Especially players like Elouassi as well. Have been with us, well, basically since the start of Misfits, right? As an organization, right? So, for us, it's of course, there's a lot of sentiment behind that. And, I think despite our results this season, anyone who watched our content or anyone who saw anything about us this year saw that, we were really all very close despite our results, despite the fact we were losing. We weren't tearing each other apart. On the whole, we had a very, very good atmosphere throughout the year. So, letting go of these players isn't easy, but, at the same time, this is the best Overwatch League in the world. This is one of the top leagues in esports. It's a professional sports league, and any team striving for results is going to want to field the best team possible. And, there were, without going into too much detail, there were strengths that all of our players had, but it's also about, what we want to create going forward, whether they fit that. And, we just felt like, there, for example, there might have been some issues with flexibility in certain places, or, perhaps we wanted someone with a different communication role in a certain position, So, I mean, there's so many different factors that go into building a team that I could not talk about on one talk show,
of course.
that have been a part of like many hours of discussion, that have gone into this decision making, and it is very sad for us, and really, like, I think going forward, we're going to have a great bond with most of these boys, and they worked with us for a long time, and we're very sad to see them go, but at the same time, we're very excited for them and what they do going forward, and we hope they all land on their feet, and I hope they don't kick our ass next year, obviously, but like,
right.
I really hope they all do well going forward, because they were all picked for Overwatch League this year for a reason.
Yeah. And
I'm super curious, and we touched on this earlier in the show, but I'm super curious, where your scouting is most excited. Obviously, it's very premature to talk about Season 2 signings at this point, but, you've got Overwatch Contenders in Korea, where there's just a ton of talent. We're seeing really, really great teams come out of North America and Europe in Overwatch Contenders as well. But then, of course, you've also got all these releases from other teams. Can you give us, like, what are you most excited about? Korea, the Western scene, the drops, the players dropped from existing Overwatch League teams. Like, what are you seeing right now out there in terms of scouting?
I mean, like, it's no secret, Ben said, we trialed over 50 players in this initial, like, Overwatch League process. So, I think we got a very, like, good mix and good gauge of, like, players from, like, multiple different regions. Like I said, we held Western trials and we held Korean trials separately. So I think we got a very good assessment of, both the West and Korea. But I think, I really think, like, every big region has something to be excited about. And, I think one thing that we'll be doing in this World Cup is, we'll be watching for these, like, smaller countries, like you said, maybe Brazil, for example, is known to produce a lot of talent across different esports, right? I mean, in CS, they're arguably, for a while, they were the best CSGO country, right? Well, not arguably, they were, right? So, like, it will be interesting for us to see how countries like that and, other countries that, might not know about, showcase their talent, and for us, we're not going to be picky and choosy about where we want our players. We want the best players that we can get, and we want to build a team that continues the legacy that Misfits and now Mayhem will have going forward, and that's very important to us.
Okay, well, let's talk about. So there's a lot of questions, obviously, in the community, and I know there's misconceptions in the community. So I just kind of want to spend some time and have you maybe clear some of those up, if you don't mind. And most of them have to do with Season 1, right? So let's just start off. First off, why was the roster size so small? It's like like, just talk about that, because the misconception, I think, is that you guys were, I don't know, there's a lot of different misconceptions here. Some saying, like, oh, they're just cheap or whatever, they don't want to, like, pay more players, and so on and so on. So I'd like to hear just what the actual reason is.
Yeah, so we had, first of all, I'd like to say we had no intention of staying as 6. We were unsure about, how Overwatch League would play out, like many other teams were as well. But maybe our worries were slightly different. I mean, we saw that substitutes were very hard to integrate into League of Legends, for example, or haven't been done very successfly, at least at the highest level. So, that was a concern for us. We kind of wanted to scope the landscape a little bit as to, how teams integrate the substitutes. But at the same time, we started our signing process. Like, we started signing players before the season started. We hoped some would be there before the season started, but some, almost all, like, were not there until, like, very late on, due to different variables. I mean, for example, Saya, an awesome guy, we anticipated they would have been there by the end of stage 1. But we got a request for additional evidence on their visas, and that delayed the process by another like 3 to 4 weeks. There were unfortunate scenarios like that. I'm not going to blame our results on that, but there were areas, I would say. Obviously, we picked up players as the season went on. That was our intention from the start. But one thing we really did fuck up on, and I'll be honest, is the size of the coaching staff. Which is really no excuse from our side, because Jacob, I mean, you obviously, I don't know about you guys, but like Jacob, you obviously watch a lot of League of Legends too. And I mean, you'll know that like on the Misfits side with our URCS operation, we're known for being on the forefront of investment into infrastructure around the team and coaching staff. We have definitely like the largest coaching staff in Europe in LCS. So, for us, not giving Vitis the support staff he needed was, absolutely inexcusable. And that's definitely an area where we messed up, but at the same time, we had a roster that dropped 2 games the whole of Contenders season 1 regular season, so which I would say is not good. It's dominant, right?
Yeah, Misfits going into Overwatch League were, they were one of the best European teams, like no question. In the
right,
Contenders.
Of course, So of course we were shocked, but we also thought with the structure of how the league had breaks several times a season would play to that. But there were like problems with visas and like other small things, along the way. But like I said, no excuse from us and the coaching staff. We take full responsibility for that. We fucked up.
So one big question right now is just, I think a lot of people are asking is just about the coaching staff. I mean, it's literally about Mineral, right? And Vitas is his name, by the way, whenever Joe mentions him. So yeah, with Mineral, obviously he took a break, he had to take a break, midway through. So explain that a bit more, just from the standpoint of the team and from Mineral. It's just, even from Mineral's standpoint, and because I think that a lot of people are viewing that in very weird ways. Like that. I don't think it's necessarily exactly the true scenario that went on in terms of what happened there. So explain that a little bit, like in terms of just coaching staff in the beginning and then Mineral taking that break and then so on.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like you can go anywhere on Reddit, on Twitter, wherever, right? Any form of social media, and you'll see, a lot of hate surrounding Vitis. Maybe because he left early, maybe because of our results last season. But I mean, people need to remember that he was Misfits coach prior to Overwatch League. And we were very successful in Misfits, and he proved to us over a long period of time that he was very capable of being a good coach and a good leader. And I really do attribute a lot of his downfall on us, in the fact that we couldn't provide, we didn't provide the support staff around him that would enable him to succeed, and when one man is doing like 3 or more people's jobs, it does burn out the guy, and he got burnt out, and that's on us. So what we did is, he asked us if he could go home, and we said yes, go ahead. At this point in the season, I'm not going to say it was, it wasn't looking too hot for us, right?
Well, this is season 2. This is like end of season 2, like it's around. It wasn't beginning of season 3, right? It was like end of season 2, right? Something like that.
It was stage 3, ish.
Was it stage 3? Was it stage 3? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's stage 3ish. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was around stage 3. He was obviously like very burnt out, and he went home. He asked us for a break, and of course we let that happen. We didn't concede the season there. We had Ryder and Albert there, and we were very confident that they would be very capable. with the increased responsibility. But of course, it wasn't the same, without Vitas. Vitas was the head coach, and many players in the team respected him and looked up to him. So losing him was, yes, it was like a significant blow, and that was on us. So yeah, I'll talk about when he went home. So obviously he went home. We actually got our sports psychologist from Misfits, and we had him do sessions with Vitas every week, try and bring him up to speed. We said to Vitas, hey, look, man, like, do what you need to do to get back to 100%. We'll provide any tools you need to do that. And he said he wanted to keep busy. So we actually started our trialing process, I would say, for Overwatch League, because certain players that we scouted in our initial contenders scout, I guess, our contenders trials, are players that we would potentially look at for Overwatch League as well. I can't say that for sure now, but back then we were trying to pick up as many pieces as we could that could potentially compete for a spot the next year, and compete with the current guys we had for a spot on the team next year. We always had the intention of letting the guys in the team fight for their spot, and also let new players coming in compete for those spots too. So yeah, he actually led that whole trialing process from Europe. He did the European portion of the trialing. We ran North American trialing with our contender staff, and Korean. We couldn't do an exclusive Korean trial, but having Ryder, we were very well informed as well. So yeah, we kept tabs. We talked to a lot of the players, and we really started our rebuilding process at that time. So he kept busy. It wasn't him going home just
Doing
having
nothing.
No contact whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he felt himself that he wasn't okay with himself, not doing anything, and while we wanted him to not do anything that was strain his well-being anymore, we wanted him to do what made him happy, and keeping busy was something that made him happy. So I think that yes, a lot of the hate is deserved on our results, but I think with Vitas' situation in particular, that is on us. So this next year, again, it's no secret that we are keeping our current coaching staff, and we're also looking to expand as well. I want to see how these guys do when we do give them all the tools from the get-go, when we do provide the infrastructure around them, because Vitas has shown that he has been a very successful and good coach in the past, and we know he can do it. We know he has done it at certain points in the season. If you look at certain games we had that we lost, we're very close. We had very, very close series with top teams very early on in the season. So I don't think the hate he gets is necessarily deserved, and I think it should more be placed on us for that area which we did screw up in.
Okay, well.
But yeah, like I said, going forward, let's see how this guy does with investment, and I'm sure he's going to turn some heads.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had very, very little time where I feel like the three, just at least Ryder and even Mineral together, even had a lot of time to work together during the season. So, Mineral did end up coming back really super late in the season, or officially come back, right? Really super late in the season. So, definitely cool that you guys are, giving him another chance, a fair chance, and I would say a lot of teams wouldn't do that. I don't think. I mean, a lot of times the coaching is just the scapegoat, of a bad season the Mayhem had. So, I would say that's a positive there. So another thing too, just Ryder, the whole logic stream that talked about Ryder saying that he he doesn't want to basically do anything with the team until they figure out basic things. Just kind of summing it up. Clear that up a little bit, because is Ryder really not going to work with them on basic aspects of the game, and is that actually true, or is that completely something that's blown out of proportion?
look, I don't want to try and throw anyone under the bus here, but what I will say is, there were right things that our coaches did, a lot of positives, but there were also some negatives as well, and stuff we want to improve on. We do strive for perfection. That is not something we achieved. We don't think that is something that anyone can achieve, but we want to try and get as close to it as possible going forward. And there will be things we do. Like I said, we will provide like additional infrastructure surrounding the team going forward, and also we will we'll be doing stuff with our existing coaching staff as well, which should put them in a good direction, because we know they're capable of doing it, have done it, and we have faith that they will do it.
So I want to ask this: why, at what point this season did you have to ask yourself, do we blow this up completely mid-season, or do we just stick with it and rebuild after?
I would say, when it was mathematically impossible for us to make playoffs, we said, we didn't decide, hey, we're going to blow this whole roster up. We're going to say, hey, every space in this roster is up for grabs. And, if our existing players show the characteristics and the gameplay we're looking for, then sure, we'll be very, very happy to keep them. For a longer time than we had already had them, which was longer than every team in Overwatch League, right? So for us, we had a great time with these guys, and if we could continue that streak of brilliant results we had with the guys we had prior to Overwatch League, then great. We would love to do that. So yeah, I wouldn't say hey, at any point we were like, yeah, fuck it, we're gonna blow this whole roster up. That's that. We had a set mindset going into it. I think we tried to be as open-minded as possible the whole way through this process, and clearly we're not done yet either. We're still being as open-minded as possible, and we understand that there are timing limitations for certain players. So in our trialing process going forward, we want to continue to be as open-minded as possible and strengthen our Overwatch League team and our Contenders team as much as possible going forward.
Okay, well, maybe one last thing, I guess, before we kind of wrap here. But I'd say, just generally speaking, what are you hoping for the the team in season 2? What are your goals for the season? And try to be a little bit more specific than just, oh, we want to be a good team, win more. So I'm kind of curious as to what the very specific goals are. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's actually something that I'd like to address as well. Because like I said, we want to be as transparent as possible with the community, with our fans, everyone out there. We really don't have, anything to hide. I wanted to clear up the whole bus driver thing, because I think that, everyone had question marks about that, and I think, yeah, it's a meme, and everyone still has questions about it. So. I'd love to give some insight into that. Sure. So I mean, yeah. So our house that we had was in mid city, about 10 kilometers. It was the top, kind of Koreatown, mid city ish. About 10 kilometers from the Burbank studios.
Wow, that's
which is
super close.
20-minute. Yeah, it was 10 kilometers to 10 miles. Sorry, not kilometers. Sorry, I'm in Europe at the moment.
Yeah. Still close. Yeah. Whatever.
Sorry, 10 miles away from the studio, which is 20 minutes when you have no traffic. But obviously you have to factor in Los Angeles traffic. And yeah, sometimes we couldn't have left at a time that would have enabled the guys to arrive within 20 minutes, right? But that living situation was never a permanent living solution for us. We actually had our eyes on something, prior to Overwatch League, and we were securing it just as Overwatch League started. But what we have right now is we have apartments, which are 3 minutes from the studio. No more than three bedroom apartments, and every single player has their own room. So we have separate apartments all in the same building, which is not something that I can say like every other team does, you know, but I'm not here to compare us to other teams. I'm just here to talk about what we do. So yeah, like, you know, our intention was always to move the guys into those apartments. They just weren't ready at the start of Overwatch League, but as you saw, we actually moved, I mean, not right at the start, but not too late into the season. So yeah, you know, we actually did ask our guys, we said, hey, look, like, we can move you into some of the apartments that are ready now, you know, earlier on when they were ready, or, you know, you guys can still have your own rooms in this house that we had, Mid-City, which, again, everyone had their own room. You know, I think even one of the bedrooms in there was like 24 by 15 feet, you know, just to give you a scale of the size of the house, you know, yeah. I don't mean say one of the bedrooms, right? So yeah, I mean, like, you know, we wanted to make sure their living situation was comfortable, and we understand that, you know, we were one of the older teams as well, and, you know, regardless of young or old, one thing we learned in our time in League of Legends, that like it's very beneficial for players to have their own rooms, to have a space where they can kind of like differentiate work and, you know, and their kind of spare time. So like having their own private space is like very important, and that's a promise we made to our players and coaching staff, and it's something we maintained, and, you know, will continue to maintain going forward. You know, that's something that was very important to us. We actually did ask them. As far as Kevin driving the bus, that was something that was not communicated to us. One thing that wasn't communicated to us until it became public was that the person who was supposed to be driving them at the time wasn't always doing it. And, you know, we actually acted accordingly. And I'm not saying because of that, we reallocated our general manager at the start of the season to somewhere that suited his strengths better within Misfits. And we actually got a new general manager, you know? So there were adaptations that we made throughout the season. You know, we were not okay with that. You know, that was something that was not good. Yeah, it was something that happened. But, you know, I just wanted to shed some light on that whole situation, because, you know, I do think it is a little blown out of proportion. But at the same time, yes, like, he shouldn't have been driving, you know, it's not something we are okay with, and it's not something we were ever okay with. But yes, there was miscommunication there. And yes, there was a lot of miscommunication happening last season. But I think by the end of the season, even if our results were obviously not good enough to get us into playoffs, we had made a lot of adaptations in the infrastructure that made it like a good place for the players to be. And like I said, you know, our atmosphere was very good in the team, and I think part of that was to do with like the infrastructure we provided. You know, like we have a private chef, for example. So yeah, you know, like there are things we do.
A lot of changes this year. That's so.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, I think things we have done, you know, and things we will continue to do, and there are things we would like to add this year, you know, like around player health, you know, that we value, and, you know, certain physical things, and perhaps sports psychology as well. You know, we're looking into all these areas about, you know, where we can add people into this team, you know, in this family, and, you know, hopefully we have, you know, a much smoother engine than we had last season.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, you know, definitely, Joe, thanks for coming on and obviously speaking to a bunch of these things, because,
Sure.
you know, again, I think, you know, a lot of the community probably didn't know a lot of this stuff. So it's definitely great that, you know, you were able to come on. But I think that's it. That's all we got though today, right, Ben? Like, there's no Q&A this week. I don't think I had any questions from the audience.
No, we're already well over time.
Yeah.
Joe, I do really appreciate the transparency. You know, obviously season 1 didn't go quite how you guys wanted, but I like seeing you guys address everything transparently and openly and directly. And good luck in the next season.
No, thank you very much, and, you know, thank you again for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course, man. definitely rooting for you being here in Florida, of course. So looking forward to just the new player announcements and everything that's going to be coming up in the next month or two or whatever. So
Me too.
Excited to see it. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, guys. So I think we're gonna wrap up, do some shout outs before we take off. Actually, Joe, you want to start us off? Any shout outs you want to do before we take off?
Yeah, shout out to the Misfits fans, shout out to the Mayhem fans, shout out to, the guys that were with us, for a long time as well, that we've released. Like I said before, I really hope that they land on their feet, and, best of luck to all of them. And, we've let them know individually what they meant to us as well. So, I wanted to give a shout out to them, and, biggest shout out to our Mayhem fans as well, because I really think, like, no bias, of course, but I think the fans we have are fantastic and have been fantastic, and super passionate and encouraging, despite our poor results this last season. So yeah, big shout out to those guys, and hopefully we'll give you guys more to cheer for than we already did last year.
Okay, Jacob, shout outs.
Not too many shout outs, I will say, because he's in chat. Siegel #1 fanboy, thank you for giving me a laugh with your Elmo bomb memes every time I break a story. That's always funny.
Elmo bomb memes?
Yeah, so just check the reply of anything I've broken on in the last couple of weeks, and you'll find them. Shout outs to ESPN for letting me be on the show. I'm glad I got to come on, and shout outs to you guys for having me. I always enjoy it.
Always a pleasure. Ben, how about you?
Not exactly shout outs, but some last words that I wanted to just give on the the OWL news that broke this morning. We had a lot to cover. So I think it's awesome, by the way, that there's 2 Canadian teams. I don't think we directly talked about this, but Canadian esports fans have always shown up. Every time there's been an event in Canada, the crowd has been hype. They've shown up. So I'm really happy for Canada. It's not all negativity about not having European teams, as many as we'd like. I would have loved to see another Korean team, but Canada got what it deserves. 8 more teams for next season is going to be awesome. And now I'm just going to be flipping on the twitch.tv/play Overwatch channel and watching World Cup for the rest of the day. I can't wait to see boys in blue, the USA, go at it later on today. That Canada-USA match is going to be insane.
Sunday.
But yeah, that all the way on Sunday, but still plenty to watch before then. But yeah, it was a great show. I think this was our most dense show ever, probably by far. We didn't talk about the gameplay at all. It was all industry, all background. But I hopefully some people enjoyed that type of stuff anyway. But yeah.
To be honest,
Great
I think
show.
each of these segments could have been an entire show. So, if we were doing it every week, I think we would have, probably broken this up a bit. But because we don't do the show all the time, we did have to fit a lot in here. So, yeah. Anyways, thanks to obviously Joe, Jacob, and Ben for doing the show with me today. It's definitely great. We try to do it as much as we can, guys. I know you guys have been itching for some more, but we're doing our best. You can obviously.
Oh wait.
Yeah. What?
I have some late breaking news.
Okay.
Sorry.
What?
Oh boy.
I just wanted to shout out. Humble Bundle is doing a $12 deal on Overwatch.
Okay.
I know, our show. Everyone,
Why don't you just give it away for free?
Our show right now,
just give it away for free, please.
I bet you Overwatch goes free to play in the next 2 to 3 years. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. 98% of people listening to this show already have Overwatch. Actually, probably 100%. But yeah, still good to shout out. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's definitely absolutely. $12 is almost cheap. I mean, almost free. So yeah. might as well grab a couple more accounts if you need them.
Yeah.
But let's see. Lastly, we're going to be doing some more of these, Chaos Crew things around Florida for World Cup. So if you're in the Florida area, definitely be on the lookout for that. You can follow us on Chaos Crew FL. Lawnspawns, you might correct me if I'm wrong for whatever reason. But yeah, definitely keep a lookout for that. You can find the show on youtube.com/ChanManV, as well as all the audio channels. That includes iTunes, Google Play, soundcloud.com/ChanManV, and I think that's going to be it, guys. Yeah, so definitely check out World Cup this entire weekend. USA, Canada, especially those fans. And until next time, for Joel Elouassi, Jacob Wolf, FishStix, and myself, ChanManV, we'll see you next time. Peace.